Can organic content like podcasting or social media or YouTube or whatever else that you can think of when it comes to organic content bring in leads for your business? Now, obviously, this being the REI Marketing Weekly, you're a real estate investor if you're listening. Either you're already into it or you're thinking about getting into it. Wholesaler, maybe you're a fix and flipper and you're just trying to generate leads direct to seller instead of getting them through other wholesalers or investors or whatever it is. Can organic content actually realistically bring leads into you? Now, today, and that's a question we're going to answer on today's podcast, so just a little hint, but today I have my good friend Daniel Martinez with the HiveMind. And today we're going to be talking about how he leverages a podcast. Now, he specifically works in the land industry. Him and his partner have a business where they buy and sell land. And he talks about how he leverages a podcast where he's actually utilizing that content to bring in leads for land. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can look at this. So let me give you a really good example of this. One of my good friends, Brian Snyder, out of Indianapolis, Indiana, they do motivated seller lead marketing for their business, and they're wholesalers, fix and flippers, that sort of thing. But what he does is he actually leverages a podcast that they started specifically to bring leads in for them from other wholesalers, realtors, or people that are just coming across the podcast. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to podcasting, a lot of it's SEO driven. So if you're titling the title of the podcast or the descriptions or whatever it is, a specific term, then that's going to be in the search engines of Google, of, if you're posting, hopefully your podcast on YouTube, that sort of thing. So it does work in SEO function. And here's the thing is that can bring leads in. So them marketing to other wholesalers, telling them how to bring them deals will bring them deals, and they don't have to go direct to seller. So Daniel Martinez talks about that in a little bit of a sense of the way that they do it on the land side of things. Now, I know most people that are listening to this podcast probably aren't investing in land. Maybe it's something you're considering, and this is going to be a really good episode for you. But let's say you are a wholesaler and you're like, well, I don't do land, but this is still going to be relevant for you. Podcasting is something where I typically tell people, if you're starting a podcast to generate motivated seller leads, then don't start a podcast to generate motivated seller leads, because motivated sellers aren't going to be coming back to your weekly podcast to learn how they can sell their house to you. Now, can you put other organic content out directed towards them? Absolutely, and you should. However, not in a podcast format. But if you're a wholesaler and you're starting a podcast teaching other wholesalers how to bring you deals because maybe you have the buyers and they don't, or realtors or agents or whatever it is to bring you deals, then that's a really, really good way to leverage podcasting or YouTube channel or other types of content to bring leads in for you. So this is obviously something that's near and dear to my heart, being a podcast production organization that I own. This is a really, really good topic to go over, and it answers a lot of questions for a lot of people. I mean, on a weekly basis, I have multiple people that come to me and say, Josh, I'm not a coach, I'm not an educator and influencer, but I was thinking about starting a podcast. Somebody at a mastermind told me to. How do I leverage it, or how do I use it? Because I don't think that, Nancy that's selling her house and wants to part ways with it because she inherited it and never going to hear from her again, I don't think she's going to come back to listen to my podcast on a weekly basis. This podcast right here, this episode is going to answer those questions for you. So hopefully this is going to bring a lot of value to you. Daniel and I go way, way back, and make sure you do check out all the links down in the description below to be able to check out his podcast and what they have going on as well. Enjoy this episode, take notes, and let's get into it. Josh Culler back here with the REI Marketing Weekly. I am super excited to have my long time friend, Daniel Martinez, on the show today. Daniel, what's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm all right. Happy to be here. I'm excited how circles make their way back to each other, and it's a long time coming.
Yeah, for sure. So you and I recorded a podcast recently for your show, and not sure when that's going to go out, but this show will be going out sometime like late July when you're listening to this now. So the show that I have with them might have gone out or coming out soon. So you guys make sure, I'm going to be linking everything down in the description below, the show notes of the podcast, to Daniel's HiveMind podcast. So you make sure you go check that out as well and everything that they got going on. But today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic, something that can be slightly controversial, but also extremely valuable if you do it the right way. So Daniel was talking about, Daniel's got a podcast. Like I said, I'm on it, and he's been running that. How long have you been running that podcast for now?
So it's called the Hive With Us podcast. We started it 3.5 years ago. Your episode will come out mid-July. So
nice. Okay.
We're around that time frame.
Yeah.
And we have 530 episodes.
Crazy. I see the podcast out there all the time. I'm subscribed to it. I listen to it. And it's a great show for connections, for networking, for making good relationships with people. But what Daniel's going to talk about today, so obviously like marketing is a centerpiece to this podcast and what we talk about here for active real estate investors. But he's going to talk about how he leverages his podcast to bring deals to the table and how he's leveraging relationships for that and creating other types of opportunities. Now, Daniel, like before we started the recording, I told you, I'm like, this will be interesting because typically I'll have an average wholesaler come to me and say, I want to start a podcast and I really want to like leverage it to bring in deals. And my first response is, well, we need to make sure we're looking at the demographic because a motivated seller lead is not going to line up to listen to your podcast necessarily and subscribe to it and that sort of thing. Now, other types of content, yeah, sure, maybe if you're leveraging it differently, but normally the approach I take is start a podcast to make connections with people that can bring the deal flow, so realtors and wholesalers and other professionals. But I'm interested to hear the way that you're leveraging it to bring deals in. So I'm going to hand the mic off to you. What do we need to be talking about here? You ready?
All right, I'm ready. I got to hand the metaphorical mic here.
Let's roll.
There's a couple different ways. So we've actually bought deals from wholesalers. I actually interviewed a guest, and he's like, if I have a land deal, if you look into it, possibly buy it? I'm like, absolutely. And we ended up buying a deal from him in Tyler, Texas. We paid him $50,000 for the deal, and it was a straight podcast connection.
Yeah.
And he gave us the deal. So that's one way we do it through wholesalers. We want people to know the marketplace. Me and you talk about SEO and branding when it comes to podcasting. We do a lot of episodes, and I do a lot of episodes ourselves. Sometimes it's just me and Anthony, who's my partner. We just talk about land in general. So we create a lot of content around land. So when you put land in your name, you get SEO ranking. So we use that with agents and with sellers because we can just tell them, hey, Google my name and land. They go look it up and they might not even watch it, but there's a brand power that you get instant credibility with just by Googling your name and land.
Yeah.
So we use that with sellers and agents all the time. We use it as a lead magnet with agents when we're doing out, because we pick up a lot of deals off the MLS through agents directly. So we use that as like a lead thing. Hey, go Google Anthony and Daniel land and see what comes up. I think, oh, these guys are serious buyers. So it gives us instant credibility because once you get the agent on your side, it's a lot more easier negotiations.
Yeah, for sure. Now, it's something that I always advise people with podcasts to do. Like we manage and produce podcasts for clients and people in the real estate investing space specifically. And one of the things that I always advise people to do is if you're going to have guests on the show is to strategically think about the guests that you're getting on your show, because then you can potentially build a relationship with that person and work with them at some point. Is that something that you guys do and you think about a little bit into it, and has that reaped benefits before?
It's a double-edged sword. So you almost hijack their traffic if you think about it.
Right. Audience hacking. Yeah.
It's audience hacking. You hijack their traffic. So a lot of times if you have high-level people on your show that have good SEO already, you could eventually audience hack their branding, but it gives them benefit too as well. So it's a double-edged sword that most guests know that if they do a show, they're going to get audience hacked. It's kind of like a recognizable pattern that happens.
Yeah, for sure.
But as a whole, yeah, you do want to have good guests. For me, my thesis on marketing and the podcast side of it is everybody has something to teach me, and as long as they're somewhat respectable, I it's my job as a podcast host to extract that nugget,
right?
And for me personally, and to give it to my audience. So all the podcasts I've done, I've learned something. I don't care who they were. I've learned something from them, or I try to at least. But it's one of those things where like I've leveled up my game, and this is with the unknown ROI of podcasting, is you level up your game just by the people you talk to, because you can pick up little nuggets for yourself. And I always tell people like the podcast is more for me than it is for my audience, because I'm the one actually asking the good questions. So it's more for me. So I that's the biggest part of I really enjoy podcasting, and I knew the power of it when I started it, but I didn't necessarily understand the ramifications that would come with it to this extent. And I've learned so much from my podcast, host and guest and guesting and hosting and doing stuff like this.
Yeah,
you
for
become
sure.
a better speaker.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, with that many episodes under your belt, 500 episodes, like just get better and better and better. And this is like, maybe this is something you could speak on too, because, you know, active investors. So me specifically in my services, I work with a lot of educators and people that are in the space of, you know, coaching, and they have masterminds, they have their own podcasts, stuff like that. They're on stages, they speak a lot. So a little bit more cleaned up. But somebody that, let's say they're an active wholesaler and they don't have any form of education, they don't teach people what they do, they really never get on video in any way, shape, or form. A lot of times the biggest question I get is people will say like, you know, I'm afraid to be on video just because like I know I'm gonna suck at it. Like I'm gonna be terrible on video. I'm not gonna say the right things. What's your piece of, I know yours probably gonna be similar to mine, but what's your piece of advice for somebody like that, for you starting? Maybe you remember, you know, ground zero when you got going.
Absolutely. I would say if this is something you want to do, just break those chains early. I'm an introvert at heart, and I've been doing this so long. I'm kind of, my extrovert has come out a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I've grown and built this muscle for this. Like I can hop on camera and do a one-shot promo, and you can't do that if you've never been in front of a camera.
Right.
Like you might get stage fright if you speak in front of 50 people, but I've spoken in front of 600 people, you know? So it's one of those things where you kind of build up this muscle. And if it's something that you understand the ramifications and you want that benefit, you got to break that mold early. You got to break that new barrier, break that ceiling, and you're just going to get over it. Like everybody's first 50 episodes are terrible. It is what it is, but you get better over time by doing repetition.
For sure. I tell people, like, pick your favorite influencer, Alex Hormozi, Ryan Pineda, like Grant Cardone. I don't care who it is. Pick your favorite influencer, track back to their very first video, track back to their first 50 videos, like you said, that they've ever put out. And I guarantee you maybe it's not trash, but it's not even close to what it is today. And it just comes with practice. Over time, you get better at it, just like with anything else, and anything else at all. One of the pivots that I want to make, because you've brought it up a couple of times, is the SEO portion of when you put content out. I'm dangerous enough in SEO to know what I'm doing and know what I'm doing for clients and that sort of thing. I have a person on my team that's an expert in SEO. When we're titling podcasts, writing show notes for them, descriptions, stuff like that. On your side, what are some things, somebody that's listening, pretend that the person that's listening has no clue how SEO works, the functions of it. Not that I'm looking for you to give an elementary like school lesson on it, but what are some of the things that people need to be thinking about when it comes to SEO and driving marketing that way?
It depends what your end goal is. You have to understand that potentially you could get evergreen traffic forever. And this is one of the beauty about podcasting, is that I can record this 30 minutes with Josh here today, and my kids can watch it 30 years from now, hypothetically. So you have to understand the evergreen content you're creating and where do you want it to go. Some people just want traffic. Some people want sales. Some people want new students. Some people want course sales. Some people want qualified borrowers to give them money, or lenders to give them money. Some people want qualified leads to sell their property. Like, it depends what your all in all goal is. And it takes a lot of effort over a long period of time before you see results. SEO is a very long-term game play. Don't expect to get results. If you're trying to get course sales, don't expect to get results after your 10th episode. Yeah, like, this is stuff that takes seasoning. It takes time. It takes a lot of work and effort for a long time. But once you do it, it snowballs into this huge, massive thing that just produces leads forever.
Yeah, for sure. I look at, so the way I explain content, like from a theoretical standpoint, is, or just a good illustration, right? So like right before I got on this podcast, I literally just came straight from the gym. I did shoulders and upper back today, right? I remember when I first started going to the gym and lifting seriously, that like it was all just, it wasn't like I wasn't fat or chubby or anything like that. It just, there was not a lot of muscle. And I was at the gym today. I'm like, damn, I'm getting some definition. I'm getting some tone. But I've been going to the gym doing that workout consistently with some progressive overload, like over time, but nothing too crazy, for the last like 3 or 4 years. It's taken time and consistency. So I equate content marketing, specifically when I'm in podcasts, to going to the gym and lifting. You're not going to see, you may feel good like right off the bat, but there's going to be times you're like, what's a waste of time? Like, why am I going? But you know in the back of your head, like, I need to be doing this. It's something that I really need to be doing. That's why it's important to understand, like what you said with the SEO when you started off with answering my question, was like, when you know what your end goal in mind is, like, what are you trying to accomplish with it? And that's really important, obviously, because that kind of guides and dictates the way that you leverage the podcast in the first place, right? So
absolutely. I always think about like this with Mr. Beast. Mr. Beast has been on YouTube for like 13 years or so. It was on like 5 years before he hit 100,000 views.
I say it feels like he just got popular like recently,
but he's been doing it for over a decade. So you have to understand the long-term value of your content, and usually it's going to take 5 to 10 years. And if you're okay to wait that timeline, then it's something you do.
For sure. Absolutely. So, dude, one thing I want to pivot into, I know you didn't want to like go deep into like the HiveMind and stuff like that, but one of the questions that I know, and as a software, I do want you to talk about that briefly and explain to the viewers what that is. But one of the things that I really wanted to kind of talk to you about was lead follow-up and automation and that sort of thing. Like, I know HiveMind can provide some sort of like system for that, and maybe you can explain that a little bit better, but what's the importance of having like an automated system to be able to follow up and capture leads? Look, first of all, capture leads, follow up with them, make sure that it's systemized and that sort of thing. Can you talk about that just a little bit? Because I do know that's important.
If you are going in the content space, you need to build your list. I don't care how you do it. You need to organize, collect, and build your list, because your list is your list forever. And if you build up that your branding and confidence score with that list, that is your millions of dollars prospectively in the future forever. So you need to collect, build, communicate, build rapport with, do events with. Like, that list is your core product forever. You need to cultivate that list.
Interrupting this podcast episode to tell you guys that this podcast is managed and produced by Color Media Productions. Yes, shameless plug, that's my company. However, we do this for a lot of other people as well. Most people that we work with are in the real estate investing space. So if you're listening to this podcast specifically, you probably are a real estate investor, given it's called the REI Marketing Weekly. If you're somebody that either wants to start a podcast or you have one going and it's becoming a little bit of a hassle, you're looking to transition to somebody that works a little bit better with a fluid motion in terms of you get the recordings done and then they do everything else. Well, that's what we do. We do fully managed podcasts from start to finish, video, audio, show noting, the graphics, publishing, everything that goes into it. It's a full service business that we run here in a service for you as a real estate investor if you are running a podcast. Additionally, we also do social media and YouTube management as well. So all of that being on the organic side, if you are interested in learning more about working with us and just recording content with guidance and strategy set by myself personally, and then not doing anything else after that, where we're taking care of everything from start to finish, then make sure you go check us out at colormedia.com, CULLER media.com. Hit us up there and we can learn more about working together, hop on a phone call and see what we could do for you. Now back to the episode. Give me an example of what you're doing with your list.
Yes. Okay, so first of all, build a list, collect it, do something with it. Number 2 is provide some type of value. One thing we always do is we do an annual event every year. We're going to have our 4th annual event in Corpus Christi. We usually have 100, 150 people show up. And it's kind of a way for people that over the country to come together and meet with each other. Because I live in California. Most of my stuff is in Texas. My partner's in Texas. My main acquisition guy's in Florida. So it's almost like a company retreat where we just invite people to come out.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity for the company to come together.
For sure.
We have an excuse to do it.
Yeah.
So you want to use your list to provide value, education. One of the biggest things I like about the education space is I provided a lot of education through the podcast and YouTube and all this stuff. People will come up to me and they'll be like, they have such a confidence, like we've been friends forever. Like if you build up like a long-term value with them, if you provide a lot of educational content that you use or people use to become better investor or better whatever your product or service is, education, better mindset, better producer in social media marketing, whatever that is, whatever your product or service that you're pushing, if you provide good value and people actually utilize that and make money with it, you have a really big confidence score with your audience that you can leverage to do whatever you want. I mean, you see Tony Robbins making millions, Robert Kiyosaki with cash flow and all those books and all these things that he's doing. It's all built off the confidence of his products, information, and books, and just content you're producing in every form.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. I've never heard of confidence score. Obviously, you have your SEO score. I love the confidence score. I've never heard it said that way. You got a story for this?
No, I have a term for this.
Okay.
The term is social equity. I did an episode of my podcast called Social Equity, and a lot of people, they want to exchange physical equity, which is cash for dollars.
Yeah.
But when you exchange social equity, it's usually information. And when you exchange information at a high level, people want to pay you back in dollars.
Oh,
so social equity.
That's tight, dude.
And if you build up a big enough bank of social equity,
yeah,
they're going to want to repay you back in physical dollars.
I love that. So I actually just got off a podcast with Alex Pardo. I was talking to him about relationships, stuff like that. And I always say currency follows value. So it's what you just said is a better explanation of it. Mine's like a very like the cliff notes of your explanation. I'm going to start using that, man. I'm stealing that from you.
Social equity.
Love it.
We got a couple terms we're coining that they're really like, we kind of came up with them.
Yeah.
And they're right on the money, because a lot of people, they don't see the value, like, especially if everybody who's real estate related or whatever. You work with you're a wholesaler, you work with that buyer. How I'm going to bring you deals. I'm going to bring you deals. Mm-hmm. You value the relationship monetarily. What if you position that relationship to become your lender, and he's lending on you to do the same deals, and now you're actually flipping the deals yourself, and your buyer has turned themselves into a lender, and now you're the buyer. So you gotta think about your social equity you're providing in the marketplace, and as a podcast, you can distribute it in the masses, and you don't even know who you're affecting, who you're touching with it, but you're spreading around this social equity that somebody can meet you and like, hey, dude, my video, I got 1 million views with that video based off of you made that episode about ABC strategy to go viral, and I went viral. Like, I'm gonna buy into your mastermind. Like, that's how you get people to buy into you physically, with physical dollars and with social equity.
Yeah, and dude, like I gotta tie this back to like the intentionality of this podcast specifically, which is marketing for real estate investors. Guys, he's not just talking about like being an influencer or being a coach or anything like that. This is applicable to even like if you're marketing to motivated seller leads. It's the exact same concept. There's no difference in it. If you can deliver more value, like we hear it all the time, like, price isn't always the most important thing in a motivated seller's mind. That's not always true. And in fact, you'll find that normally it's not true. There's other factors that play into a decision that they're going to make to sell a house to you or the next wholesaler or the one after them. And the methodology, the social equity that you mentioned, that's good. So I'm gonna have to pay you every time I say it now after you coin it. Okay. So you just made money off our relationship too. Maybe not a lot, but it's monetized now.
No, it's such a minute thing. I interviewed I had an episode with a guest, and he said that exact thing happened, which is why I bring it up as an example. He had a lender that was lending. He was a hard money lender, a bunch of deals. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he's like, "Hey, I just need an opportunity. Like, charge whatever you want. Let's make it work." Yeah. So charge whatever you want, and he's like, "Hey, here you go. Here's the deal's done. I did it in record time. Here's your money back." And he's like, "Dude, I overcharged you because you had no experience, but you did a good job. Here's the money." So he's like, no, don't worry about it. Keep out. Let's do more deals. And he leveraged that social equity. So he gave him back the money. And he said at one point that one lender had $8 million out with him.
Wow. That's insane. That is crazy. And that's just from
building that social equity. He was a hard money lender for probably hundreds of investors.
Right.
He put $8 million into one guy.
Right. One guy, which is a lot of money. That's a lot of monetary equity, right? It's like, man, my head's spinning right now. That's good stuff. I like that a lot. We're gonna use it. That's a social clip right there, guys. So video editor listening right now, we're gonna chop that. We're gonna chop that into like 5 different clips. So, dude, this has been so fantastic. I want to be able to give you. We're running out of time here, but I want to give you the opportunity to be able to talk about the podcast, HiveMind, what people can talk, kind of expect in. You already talked about the podcast just briefly, kind of like what people can expect, but also the software. Talk to us about that, how people can sign up, learn more.
Yeah. So podcast is hivewithus.com. It's Hive With Us podcast, over 500 episodes. HiveMind is our CRM/brand. It's an automation platform built off a GHL platform. And then the big thing that we're doing is land education. So we ourselves are land investors, and we do multi-million-dollar land deals. So we actually have milliondollarlandmastermind.com. Right now we're doing a package of the CRM, the land mastermind, and a school community group for $100 a month.
Awesome. Can't beat that, man. All right, cool. Well, we're going to have all that linked down in the description below, so you guys make sure you check that out in the show notes in the description. Daniel, bro, it's been a good time. Thanks so much for coming on. We'll have to have you back again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining in today. If you haven't already, make sure you have subscribed to the podcast. If you did enjoy this, or you just want to give your opinion and feedback about this show specifically, maybe ways we can make it better, please do me a huge favor. And on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whichever one you're listening on right now, go and leave a review with your thoughts and feedback and make us better. And then also, if you haven't already, check out the YouTube channel that is listed down below for me. I'm going to be putting out lots of content, not just the REI Marketing Weekly, but a lot of other stuff that could be of value as well. And I think it's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.